She's a genius idol who sells out domes. But the girl sitting behind him in class is hiding something that could end her entire career. And he's the only one who knows.
There's a girl selling out entire domes at 15 years old, and the boy watching her on his phone has no idea she sits right behind him in class. Her name is Kuramiya Rei, the center of the rising idol group Blue Impulse, beautiful and magnetic and everything a genius idol should be. The boy is Hiruno Hizashi, a student under crushing family pressure to be perfect at this elite high school. At that time, he had absolutely no idea what was actually going on. The school is the kind of place where teachers hand back tests with warnings that one bad score could haunt your academic future. Every student around Hiruno is already deep in academic research papers on the first week, like it's nothing. Hiruno sits in the back row, quietly panicking, remembering the last time he disappointed his family in very specific and loud terms. The gap between him and everyone else feels enormous, and he doesn't even know the biggest gap of all is sitting right in front of him. Hiruno's family doesn't do gentle encouragement. They do threats about being locked out of the house for a bad score. His mother's voice is etched into his brain as a recurring nightmare of shame and family honor. He studied himself nearly into the ground just to get into this school, and now here he is, still worried he's not enough. The cameras and reporters piling up outside the school gate for someone famous aren't helping his nerves either. The person those cameras are waiting for is Kuramiya Rei. On stage, she's an otherworldly force who packs domes and moves merch in seconds. She's been called a once-in-a-generation talent, beautiful, intelligent, and supposedly perfect at everything, including her grades. The whole school buzzes about the fact that she manages to be an idol and an elite student at the same time. What Hiruno is about to discover is that the supposedly in that sentence is doing a lot of heavy lifting. She ends up in his classroom after school when it was supposedly double booked, but she's sweating through her uniform and reciting something under her breath, and that's not how a scheduling mistake looks. Hiruno catches her and she pivots instantly to smiling and explaining that maybe the teacher made a mistake. Laughing awkwardly. He is confused but not cruel, so he just stares and tries to figure out what he's actually looking at. She is very clearly hiding something, and she is very bad at hiding it. She was reciting the lyrics to her next performance, she claims. But Hiruno's eyes land on the test score in her bag, and it says 16 out of 100. The genius idol who is supposedly top of her class just got a 16 on a placement test at an elite school. She catches him looking, and the whole mask drops. Not into an idol face, but into the face of a girl who is genuinely panicked and cornered. Then she shows him the answer sheet, and everything she thought went wrong was just one slipped row of answers from question 5 onward. She would have had a 94 if not for that one cascading mistake, and the logic of it actually checks out. Hiruno is standing there, going through it in his head, while she watches him with enormous anxious eyes. He does the thing he immediately regrets. He says he thinks he can help. His brain starts screaming at him before the sentence is even finished. The weight of what she tells him next lands all at once. Her mother allowed her to be an idol only on the condition that if her grades ever slipped, she was done. She promised to quit if even one score fell below standard, and she just got a 16. The career, the stages, everything she's worked for, all of it sitting on the edge of one test score. She looks at him with none of the idle composure left, just a girl who is genuinely scared. And Hiruno's plan to stay uninvolved officially crumbles. He tries to backtrack, tells himself she chose this life. She doesn't need some stranger interfering. There are real consequences to getting involved with someone this famous. But his hands are already on the practice problems, and she's already paying attention. She's not unintelligent, he realizes quickly. She just processes things differently, sideways and through association instead of straight through structure. The session is chaotic and fascinating, and he should absolutely not enjoy it as much as he does. They end up in the empty classroom until the cameras are long gone, and something about the quiet of it is strange and specific. She calls him Hiruno-kun before he's even told her his full name, and then apologizes. And then he has to introduce himself properly while she watches him, like she was afraid he'd forgotten they had an arrangement. He hadn't forgotten. He'd been thinking about nothing else. They agree to meet again tomorrow, secretly, and Hiruno Hizashi has now accidentally acquired a secret. Back at home that night, Rei is on the phone with someone. Her friend Sora is asking if the guy helping her was handsome, with the particular glee of a person who already suspects the answer. Rei says no, absolutely not. Stop it, it's completely not like that, while her face is doing the opposite of everything she's saying. Sora is delighted. Rei hangs up and sits in the dark, going, "I said it really wasn't like that, okay?" to nobody. The sessions start the next day, after school, empty classroom. And Hiruno discovers immediately that traditional teaching methods are not going to work here. Rei cannot retain information without a story or a visual hook attached to it, so he starts drawing diagrams with characters in them while she provides increasingly creative names for the historical figures. He thinks she's getting off track every time she starts drawing. She is drawing to remember, and it works better than anything else he's tried. History is one thing, but Japanese is another. Hiruno discovers Rei has a genuine weakness with kanji reading when she announces that she'll make sure to be famous for him to hear. He stares. She stares back. He tells her the word is famous, and the difference between L and R is actually a whole lesson now. She is very serious about this, which makes it better and worse in equal measure. Pronunciation practice is the session that costs Hiruno his composure, because Rei leans across the desk and tells him to pay attention to her mouth while she forms the sounds. Inches away, completely serious, zero awareness of how this reads. He is internally leaving his body while trying to evaluate whether she can distinguish the L in Europe from the R. She gets it right eventually and looks up at him with a question in her eyes, and he somehow says good, like a normal person. He does not feel like a normal person. The next day is music class, and Rei has to sing in front of everyone. She worked on the pronunciation, but couldn't practice enough for actual singing. And Hiruno sits in the class watching with his stomach in knots. He tells himself, if she fails, it's his fault. She walks to the front and sings, and even with the limited practice, her voice is something else entirely. Hiruno sits there afterward realizing that he had been thinking of her as an ordinary girl, and she very clearly is not. After class, she finds him in the hallway and says quietly, "Thanks for earlier." He says it was nothing. He's sorry for butting in. She tilts her head, and then she says, with complete sincerity, "You were cool." He walks away from that conversation with his face doing something he refuses to look at in a mirror. The full picture comes into focus. Due to her idle schedule, Kuramiya Rei has fallen behind in her studies, and if she gets another failing grade, her mother will force her to quit. Hiruno was chosen to help by accidentally discovering her secret, and now their goal is to escape supplementary lessons for real. She suggests exchanging line contact info so they can communicate anytime, because that's just practical. He takes her phone and adds himself, while quietly imploding about what it means that he is now in Kuramiya Rei's contacts. The first time they try to exchange contacts publicly is a disaster because Rei decides the way to do it is to shake both phones at him in the middle of a hallway full of people. Hiruno starts visibly trembling about who might see this. She looks at him in genuine confusion and explains that shaking phones to add contacts is cute. He dodges the entire moment by pointing out that her profile picture is a poodle, and somehow they end up talking about her dog for 5 minutes. She lights up talking about the poodle. 3 years old, she loves taking walks with him, and tells Hiruno he should get a dog too with complete sincerity and radiant energy. The gap between idol on a stage and girl enthusiastically advocating for dog ownership has never been more visible. He thinks about how her face changes completely when she's talking about something small she genuinely loves. The difference between that and the performance. He doesn't say any of that out loud. Then she shows him the hair extensions, puts them in right there, and becomes a different person in seconds. She explains it like flipping a switch. With them in, she's the idol. Without them, she can relax. She says she can relax in front of him now, like that's a casual fact, and then immediately gets flustered and says she has a lesson, goodbye, and leaves before the air can settle. Hiruno stands in the hallway holding the weight of that sentence like it's something fragile. The class group chat introduces a new problem. Every single student in year 1 treats Kuramiya Rei like a saint, and Hiruno reads through it knowing exactly what they don't know. People are saying she'd never do anything to cause online rumors because she's a genius who thinks everything through. Hiruno, who has seen a 16 on a test paper and watched her try to remember the Taika Reformation through interpretive diagram, says nothing. He just scrolls and gets more quietly anxious. He shows up to their next session and instinctively sits far away from her at the other end of the room, and she looks at him immediately and says, "Why are you so far away?" He explains quietly that someone seeing them together could create misunderstandings, that rumors spreading online could damage her career. She listens, tilts her head, and asks, "Have all this time you been avoiding me because of some rumors?" She's not angry, she's almost amused, and he is fully mortified. She tells him gently that she's always cautious about these things, that he doesn't need to worry about it for her. Then she says he's the type to make strong assumptions, and she stabs him with this observation while smiling lightly. He tries to defend himself and fails, and she just says he's a really nice person for worrying about her. He does not have a response to that won't get him in trouble. He makes a decision, loudly, internally, with fist-clenching intensity. He is going to protect her from rumors. He is going to be the responsible one, and he swears on his own name that he won't let Kuromiya Rei become a victim of online gossip. Rei is a professional idol who has thought about crisis management more than he has. He is a boy who cried doing entrance exam prep and has a terrifying mother. He is going in anyway. The next escalation is Rei telling him they need a new study location because the classroom is getting risky. And then before Hiruno can think it through, he is walking into a karaoke box called Boy Sound alone while she enters separately to avoid being seen together. He sits in the private room, locked door, just the two of them, and tells himself this is completely fine and professional. He is lying to himself about this completely. He got swept away again. Hiruno sits in the karaoke booth going through every reason why this is objectively the worst situation for someone trying to be careful about rumors. It looks like a date. He knows it looks like a date. He screams at his own brain to focus on mathematics and succeeds for approximately 30 seconds. Then he spends the next 3 minutes wondering what clothes Kuromiya-san is going to arrive in. She shows up in a disguise, hat, glasses, casual oversized clothes, completely different vibe, and says, "It's me," like she's checking in from a spy mission. He's startled, she laughs at his expression, and she tells him she's always careful about these things, so he doesn't need to worry. She herds them to the back seats with complete confidence while he trails behind going, "So this is what you meant by being careful." They sit down and open their textbooks, and it's the most unusual tutoring session anyone has ever had. Studying math in a karaoke box works, somehow. She concentrates better than he expected, and they actually get through real material. When her phone buzzes with a notification about Blue Impulse's new song Promised dropping, she tells him he doesn't have to see it. He has already opened it. She plays a clip anyway, in idle mode, holding the phone like a mic, and Hiruno sits across from her watching both versions of her exist in the same small room. He starts thinking, sitting there in the karaoke booth while their study session runs on, about why he's actually helping her. At the time she first asked, he never gave it proper thought. Now he's looking at her and thinking about her determination to keep doing 2 things at once without giving up, and something in him goes quiet and specific. He tells her, stumbling over the words, that watching her work this hard is inspiring, and then immediately backtracks and says that's just a general observation. Please don't take it seriously! Rei looks at him after he says it and says she doesn't really like it when he keeps framing everything as a benefit calculation. She says she got something out of this too. The karaoke bill question becomes a whole thing. She insists on paying because she works and it's the least she can do to repay him. He insists she doesn't have to, and she yanks the payment slip out of his hand while he tries to take it back. She wins by declaring that being with a popular idol like her is itself a benefit, which she immediately recognizes was the wrong thing to say out loud. He pays after all, but Rei says, "Let me give you something in return," before they leave. And Hiruno's heart rate does something unreasonable while he tries to figure out what she means. She then calls him that night for a math tutoring session over the phone because her maths homework is from page 36, and she doesn't understand any of it. He answers the call still wearing his skull print pajamas, his sister Akari having already asked him if he's okay because his face has been weird since he got home. His face is going to stay weird for a while. Rei talks to her friend Sora that same night over line. Sora asks how the karaoke was, points out she was alone with a guy, and asks with barely concealed excitement if nothing happened. Rei types back, "It was nothing like that," and sits in her room in the dark looking at her phone. In the background of the image, Hiruno's silhouette is visible out a window at a distance, hunched over his desk, visibly studying. It was nothing like that. She keeps looking at her phone. Hiruno gets home to his little sister Akari, who immediately asks how his date was. He says it was absolutely not a date. It is absurd to call it a date. For someone like him to go on a date with someone like her would be staining her existence with sin. Akari gives him the flattest look possible and says his reaction is disgusting. He knows she's right and goes to his room to search stylish pajamas for men on his phone. Rei sends him a line message that says, "Let's do it," about the next study session, and Hiruno stares at his phone for an embarrassing amount of time, trying to figure out the correct response. He's about to Google it when he realizes he can't make her wait, so he just sends back something that he hopes reads as calm and does not. She calls him shortly after, and they do the math tutoring session over video call, her face bright on his screen, her expression sharp as she works through problems. His face is completely red and she tells him so with mild concern. The phone tutoring works. Rei actually stays focused, and by the end of the call, she tells him that even so, she met Hiruno-kun, they studied properly, and now they've become friends who can talk on the phone like this, and this makes her very happy. Hiruno says, "Yeah," in a voice that means multiple things. She says, "That's a bit different from what I mean," while smiling. and there is something very specific happening that neither of them is saying directly. He ends the call and sits with it for a while. Chapter 9 opens in May with the next term exam 2 weeks away, and Hiruno muttering study plans to himself at his desk so intensely that his classmates start whispering that he's scary. Rei, busy with her idol schedule, has still been steadily improving. She's been putting in the work even when he's not there. He reminds himself he needs to study for his own sake too, not just manage hers. He says this to himself firmly, and then immediately goes back to reviewing her material. A girl named Suzuki Mao shows up in Hiruno's classroom out of nowhere. Blonde, energetic, in a gyaru style that's definitely pushing the school dress code, and she looks at him with a grin and says, "Hizashi!" She's his childhood friend from preschool, sociable, and always at the center of whatever room she's in. She wants him to come hang out with class 2 after school because exams are over, and he should make some friends. He says he'll pass. Mao says she can't help him study, but she can help him make friends, which is the kind of thing Hiruno files under, "not the help I need." She notices he's already in the classroom though, and Rei is already there too, opening her notebook, which makes zero sense to Mao because why is the genius idol here? Hiruno starts to explain. It does not go well. Rei introduces herself to Mao, and Hiruno says, with the confidence of someone making a poor choice in real time, that Kuromiya-san is actually helping him with his studies. Mao goes very still. She looks at Rei. She looks at Hiruno. She looks back at Rei and asks if that's an act, because something about the whole situation is reading as very suspicious to her. Rei opens the session notebook and tells Mao with complete composure, "You can just mimic me." The history quiz begins. Mao is now being roped into this, and Rei asks who got assassinated during the Taika Reformation. Mao confidently answers Soga no Kujiro, which is incorrect. Then Soga no Unagi, also incorrect. Then Soga no Maguro. Hiruno sits there with spinning eyes, wondering if he is doing any of this right. Mao's eyes narrow as the session continues, and something is clearly clicking in her head about the dynamic in this room. The genius idol tutoring her childhood friend's study session, the familiarity between them, the way Hiruno said Rei's name. She's smart enough to know that what she just saw wasn't a normal study arrangement. She looks at both of them and says, "What are you two hiding?" And then she lands the thing that stops everything cold. "That earlier was just an act, no?" Rei is very still. Hiruno's internal monologue has gone offline. Mao is looking at them both with the expression of someone who has correctly put together a puzzle and is waiting to see what the other people in the room will do about it. She says, "Hizashi is not that dumb." And the question underneath that sentence is whether she's figured out the secret. Whatever comes next is going to change the shape of everything they've built. And that's exactly where the volume ends.